Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A quorum being present, the meeting will come to order. I'd like to ask you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening. Good evening. And welcome. A belated happy Thanksgiving to everyone and an early happy holidays. A few things before we get started. All non-voters should be seated upstairs in the non-voting section. All voters should have a yellow tag with your lanyard. I'd ask that all please turn your phones and other electronic devices to vibrate, please. If you wish to speak on the articles, I would ask that you come to one of the microphones and identify yourself and give us your address. We have 4 articles tonight. As in accordance with the town's bylaws, we will use the random selection process. However, I wanted to let you know that I have determined that Articles 1, 2, and 3 are dependent upon each other. So in the bowl, there are only 2 tickets, one for Article 4 and one for Article 1, 2, and 3. When I pick articles, that ticket that is 1, 2, and 3, we will take them up in order, 1, 2, and 3, as they are dependent upon each other, okay? All motions and amendments for all 4 articles need to be presented to me in writing. And as I mentioned before, if this room gets full, we will then go upstairs, and then we will go to the cafeteria. There's plenty of seats still here in the middle. Folks up the back, I need to ask you to please take seats, as we do not count the votes of the people up the back. Questions before we get started? Yes, if you could take a microphone, please. Okay. That's okay. Ready to go? Greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and in the manner prescribed in the bylaws of said town, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town qualified to vote in town affairs to meet and assemble at the Wilmington Middle School Auditorium, 25 Carter Lane in said town of Wilmington on Thursday, the 4th day of December 2014 at 7 p.m., then and there to act on the following articles. Mr. Shampoo.
I would move that the moderator dispense with further reading of the warrant and take up and make reference to each article by number.
Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. We are to Articles number 1, 2, and 3. Article 1. Again, we will take these up in order. We will discuss them as they appear in your booklet, and we will vote them as they appear in your booklet, but we will take them up in order. So we'll take Article 1 first, vote Article 1, take Article 2, vote Article 2, and so on, okay? Article 1, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by gift, purchase, and eminent domain all or any portions of rights to the interest in the Eleanor M. Rastusha Memorial Arena and those certain properties identified as Town Assessors Map 44, Parcel 178, and Map 53, Parcel 155, and numbered 190 and 190R Main Street in Wilmington, for the use as a skating rink and other recreational and municipal purposes, to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, or any applicable statute, a sum of money for such purposes, including the payment of all costs incidental and relative thereto, or to take any other action related thereto. Is there a motion, Mr. Newhouse?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the Board of Selectmen be authorized to acquire by gift, purchase, and by eminent domain all or any portions of rights to and interests in the Eleanor M. Rastusha Memorial Arena and those certain properties identified on Assessors Map 44, Parcel 178, and map 53, parcel 155, and numbered 190 and 190R Main Street, Wilmington, Massachusetts, for use as a skating rink and other recreational and municipal purposes. And further, that $2,250,000 be borrowed pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, and appropriated for such purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Finance Committee recommendation is approval. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference between Mr. Newhouse's motion in your booklet is that he is inserting the amount of $2,250,000 as the price, and that money will be borrowed pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44. Discussion, Mr. Newhouse.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We appear before you this evening asking for an appropriation, as you know, to acquire Restusha Arena. I'd like to spend just a moment giving you a bit of the background from the past year that's gotten us to this point. Late last year, early this calendar year, we received word that the owner of the property might be interested in selling the property. So through the town manager, we reached out to the owner, asked him if those stories were true. He indicated they were, and he indicated that he'd be certainly interested in talking to the town about it. The town took a couple of tours of the facility. We did some research in terms of finances, and of course we asked the current owner for copies of the existing lease. One of the things that we've made an effort as a town to make sure we're clear about is that the facility at this time has a lease with the tenant, and that lease is effective through August of 2018. Furthermore, in the terms of that lease, the current tenant has the right of first refusal to acquire the property through May of 2015. So in very simple terms, that means that if anybody, including the town, were to tender a written offer to the property owner, the current tenant would have the opportunity to match that offer and to purchase it. So I think as a town, we've tried to be very clear to folks that we have not yet tendered an offer, nor do we intend to tender an offer until June 1st of 2015. So you might be wondering why then we've called the town meeting. Well, first of all, we've done it in order to come from a position of strength in terms of bargaining. If this body sees fit to appropriate the funds, we're essentially like a cash buyer that's out buying a home. We've got our checkbook in hand, we've got the ability to do some due diligence and to make an offer that really doesn't have very many contingencies beyond some very basic due diligence. Another reason why we think it makes sense to take this action now is because your very appearance here tonight, and hopefully your support tonight, we think sends a very clear message to the current owner, and that's that the town stands ready, willing, and able to acquire this property should he in fact decide to sell it. Another reason why it makes sense to do this now is because it enables the town manager to formulate a budget, which includes various forms of borrowing, and certainly the manager will speak to this, but there are certain short-term borrowing methods that we can make ourselves, we can take advantage of as a town, and enables the town manager to take a look at both the short-term and the long-term borrowing, not only in terms of just this facility, but in terms of facilities town-wide and some other initiatives that we would be doing as a matter of course through the budget process. Finally, by appropriating the money at this point, it also gives us the ability to have the cash in the bank to do the various forms of due diligence that you would expect us to do. I think you would expect us, if we make an offer on the property, to make a contingent upon an environmental investigation of the property. I think you would expect us, if we make an offer on the property, to make a contingent on a facilities assessment that's very detailed and very thorough in terms of understanding the condition of the rink, the age of the different mechanical components, and what we could expect in terms of maintenance and cost and the life of various components of the rink. So for all of these reasons, that's why we find ourselves calling this special town meeting well in advance of the date that we expect to tender an offer. I think that folks, when they come here tonight, expect that there be some discussion of financial implications. And again, I defer to the manager in terms of the detailed analysis, but one thing that I think is worth pointing out is that if we were to acquire the rink, at least for a period of approximately 3 years, we would simply be a landlord. We wouldn't control the operations of the rink. We wouldn't control the scheduling during that 3-year period. However, we would be realizing $12,000 a month in revenue. The debt service associated with the short-term borrowing, in order to get us through that first 3 years or so, that debt service would run us at about $35,000 a year. So at a minimum, for the first 3 years, we'd be realizing in excess of $100,000 net revenue from the facility. In terms of 2018 and beyond, again, I defer to the town manager, but I think that there's a couple of important points that the town manager's research bears out. Number one, this acquisition would not affect our taxes. We're not asking for a 2.5 debt exclusion. We're not asking for an override. What we are asking for is essentially for you to appropriate the funds, which would enable the town to use its borrowing power to leverage the cash that would be used to run a successful facility. That enterprise fund, which is the subject of Article 2, is essentially a separate special kind of account that's reserved for operations that generate revenue, and it's not at all uncommon in municipal financing to set up these separate funds, these enterprise funds, which essentially will rely on the revenue generated by the rink to service the debt. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out in terms of the financial implications is the fact that this facility is a fully constructed, improved project that has an address of 190R Main Street. It's over 13 acres, and certainly there are some resource areas. I'm not here to tell you that all 13 acres would be usable, but certainly the site hasn't been maxed out yet. So I certainly am of the opinion, I think my opinion is shared by a number of folks, that for $2.25 million for 13 acres of Main Street property that's not fully developed yet is really an investment that's worth making for the residents of Wilmington. Of course, I'm sure that when folks first heard that we were looking at this, for people that are not directly involved in high school hockey, youth hockey, figure skating, and the like, you may have said, well, why do we need the rink? And I think the answer is pretty simple. For the last 10 years plus, the residents of Wilmington have not gotten what they were promised. And not only haven't we gotten what we were promised, but the fact of the matter is we're not even getting enough ice time. Our kids deserve the same opportunities that kids from other towns get, and quite frankly, many, many kids from other towns get at that very rink. Right now, the current rate for ice time at the Restucia Arena is $309 for a 50-minute sheet of ice. I can tell you that you will not find another facility around, another skating rink in the area that charges more than $265 an hour. That $309 is slated to go up by way of 3-4-year contracts to $345 for 50 minutes by 2017. Now, to put this in perspective, in 2004, when the current operator of this rink first took over, that rate was $180 for 50 minutes of ice time. So when you do the math, you'll find that the increase for 50 minutes of ice time for a Wilmington skater has increased 72% in 10 years. That's what Wilmington families are paying, and quite frankly, nobody else around pays those kinds of rates. And while those rates continue to exist and have steadily increased, the amount of ice time available to Wilmington kids has steadily decreased. At this point in time, 17 youth hockey teams have to share 4 hours of ice time during the weekdays, and that's during the peak season of December, January, and February. The ice times that are afforded to Wilmington families are also, quite frankly, not the prime ice time. You have many folks who have to leave work as early as 3 o'clock just to get their kids on the ice for the 150-minute session that they share with 2 other teams on a weekday afternoon. And as soon as those kids get off the ice, there's that independent team that's willing to pay 60% more a year to skate, that's getting that ice time that allows their parents to work all day. It's just not what we were promised. If you were to ask a typical 16-year-old child young man, young lady, who's been playing hockey for his or her entire childhood, if he's played for Wilmington Youth Hockey or she's played for Wilmington Youth Hockey, and you said, how many home games have you played at Restucia Arena in your career? The answer is 0. Wilmington kids don't get access to that rink. Our own high school doesn't get access to that rink for all its home games. It doesn't get proper access to that rink for its practices. This, with the boys, respect to the boys' high school team, this is a 2-year state championship team that can't even practice in its own town. This isn't what we were promised. In 1984, a special town meeting voted to rezone that land, and the purpose for rezoning it was to allow for the construction of a skating rink that was very clearly and very succinctly supposed to do the following. The rink is slated for use by Wilmington Youth Hockey, Wilmington Figure Skating Club, Wilmington High School, and the Wilmington Recreation Department. Once the needs of the community are satisfied, the association may open the arena to other groups. That's not where we find ourselves today. Quite frankly, if you're a Wilmington parent, you're a Wilmington skater, and you have a problem with the availability of ice time, if you complain about it, you're threatened with being thrown out of the rink. If you complain about it, you're told that there's another group right behind you that'd be happy to pay that rate. So we have an opportunity tonight to really finish what this town started in 1984. And if we get this appropriation tonight, I know that the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, and the town are committed to making sure that we finish exactly what was started in 1984. And that's providing ice time to Wilmington kids. Thank you.
Further discussion, Mr. Hull.
Good evening. Mike has covered a lot of the areas that go to the point of why we should purchase this. From my perspective, one of the things obviously that I took a look at was the finances. In my estimation, in order for us to make the call to purchase this, I wanted to be assured that it was financially viable, that we would be able to sustain this operation without relying on the tax base. We took a look at this a couple of different ways. First of all, contacting a number of the different communities that run their own rinks, Chelmsford, Billerica, Stoneham, Burlington, to name a few, Arlington, Framingham, and talk to the folks that are involved in their operations, and found that they have a variety of different ways that they operate, in some cases actually having employees, other cases hiring a rink manager, a company to come in and do it. But at the end of the day, they all were able to sustain their operations. Just by way of example, Stoneham, the last few years, their net profit, so to speak, or the money coming back to the town has ranged from $21,000 to $152,000. Billerica for this fiscal 14 brought back $30,000. That's in excess of expenses. Burlington, they have a setup where they have a company called FMC. They lease the operation to them. They get a royalty, so to speak, of $32,000, and the rink operator takes care of maintenance and operation of the rink. Stoneham, they receive anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000 in funds that come back to the town. So it is certainly reasonable to expect that the town of Wilmington could do the same thing. We went through and put together a 20-year model that lays out what we expect the estimated expenses and revenue to be. And over the course of the first 3 years, as was previously noted, since Rotundo Enterprises will be continuing to operate the rink, there will be no expenses to the town. per the lease that Rotundo Enterprises currently has and that would continue going forward, they would pay the town $12,000 a month, so that revenue comes back to the town. After that point, again, based upon, and we did a review of the actual ice time, breaking it down in terms of peak hours, off-peak hours, open skate hours, and literally came up with a total of the number of hours in each category based upon the existing rate. We believe in year 4 that we can generate $684,680, and then various amounts, skate rental, $10,000 approximately, possible concessions, $2,000, skate sharpening, $4,500. So essentially $700,000 in year 4 in expected revenue, and then went through and did a calculation of the various expenses associated, and ran that out over 20 years. We were deliberately conservative. In terms of our estimates, one of the things, for example, that we did was to not anticipate any revenue from the Bruins. It seems pretty clear that the Bruins are planning to move elsewhere, so none of these calculations include any revenue from the Bruins. In terms of various inflation factors, we looked at very conservative increases in the revenue over the period of time, essentially a 1% increase each year over the 20 years, which is, I would say, pretty conservative. The long and the short of it is that over the course of time, we believe that it's pretty near net neutral. There may be years where it is. I would expect that there would be years where we would bring in more money than we pay out in expenses. There may be years where it goes slightly the other way, but I think on par, so to speak, that this is a self-sustaining enterprise. And that is one of the reasons why we are looking to set up this enterprise fund, which is a fund where all the money that comes from the revenue from the rink would go back into this account and then be used to pay off the expenses associated with that. The plan, if this were to go forward, is that we would, beginning after June 1st, begin negotiations with Mr. Restuccia, conduct the due diligence that is necessary, come to terms, presumably on a deal, and then expect to, in the fall of next year, go through short-term borrowing, a bond anticipation note, which is a short-term borrowing for the full amount. And then my expectation is in about 2 fiscal years, we would roll that into permanent borrowing, which would allow us to also take advantage of other capital projects that we have, while at the same time, the cost for that, the hockey rink, would be assessed back to the enterprise fund and paid through proceeds from the enterprise fund. The reason that we are going the route of borrowing is that in our estimation, first of all, we can directly charge the borrowing costs back to the enterprise fund. Okay, we're back. So the reason why we're borrowing is because we can assess that cost back. Call it, so if there's any questions.
I'll wait for the microphones to come back on so that everyone can hear the speaker. Okay, I think we're back. Good. Hey, can I get an order, please? Thank you. We're going to get started again. Further discussion, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin McDonald. I'm a lifelong resident of Wilmington. Played youth hockey in Wilmington. Actually played when we had 2 rinks, and those 2 rinks were privately owned. I come before you tonight, just wanted to share a saying with you. It's, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. A few things that I'd like to mention tonight. I spent the entire afternoon with Mr. Rotundo, who operates the rink, and he gave me quite a bit of information. Couple of things that you need to know. The Bruins have 2 more years here. They're going to Brighton. New Balance is building them a 25,000 square foot facility. The Shamrocks, who are currently at the rink, they're paying $366,000 a year. If this goes down, they're gone. They're leaving. Wilmington Youth Hockey pays about $130,000 a year. Wilmington Figure Skating, by choice, they get 2 hours a week. The Wilmington school system, maybe Mr. Hull can give me the exact amount, but it's between $42,000 and $45,000 a year they pay. So the Bruins, the lost revenue will be from the Bruins, and there will be lost revenue from the Shamrocks. But another team also is there, St. John's Prep. And St. John's Prep, I was told, is going to be going to Essex Aggie. They're building a rinks there. That's another $40,000 in lost income. With regard to ice time, if you folks here are part of youth hockey, you can back me up on this, that it's my understanding that Wilmington Youth Hockey is part of the Valley League. And the Valley League is owned by a gentleman who also owns other rinks. So the reason why the home games are not in Wilmington is because the owner of that league owns other rinks, and obviously, good business sense, wants the business in his rinks. So, well, that's what I was told.
Can I get order,
If I had a
please,
rink, I'd want my league to play in my rink.
Folks, ladies and gentlemen, if I could, one speaker at a time. If you want to speak, please take a microphone. You'll get your opportunity. Thank you.
I also passed out a handout to folks. I had the opportunity to receive tax returns from the Burbank Arena. They're a 501c3 company that by law they're required to file with the Attorney General's office. And that paper that you're looking at will show you how much money that they've been losing. They don't have the Shamrocks, they don't have the Bruins, and we will not have those. I was also given another bit of information about a facility over in Bedford. It's called the Edge Sports Center. They have 2 rinks. They also have an indoor bubble where there's 3 indoor lacrosse fields. So the point, the reason why I bring that up is that
1 minute, Mr. McDonald.
oftentimes there's a better way to do these things. Mr. Stewart, I'd like to reserve 30 seconds of my time and take 30 seconds to ask a question to our planning director. Is it true that Mr.
Mr. McDonald, you
Restuccia...
have 45 seconds.
Question for the planning director. Is it true that Mr. Restuccia also owns a separate parcel other than the rink beside this property?
Mr. Hull?
The Restuccia property was established as a condominium setup, so there is a separate area to the rink proper, if you will.
Thank you.
And
Further
is-
discussion? Yes, ma'am. Your time's up, Mr. McDonald. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
The maker of the motion, sir, gets 10 minutes. Everyone else gets 5 minutes. That's why Mr. Newhouse got 10 minutes. He got 10 minutes, as Mr. Hull got 5 minutes, and Mr. McDonald got 5 minutes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Janice Giannetti, lifelong resident, very involved in Wilmington Youth Hockey, Wilmington High School Hockey. Mr. McDonald, I want to address what you said about the Valley League. In 2004 was the last year that the Valley League had games at the Ristusha Arena. At that time, there were Valley League games there all day Saturday, Sunday, and during the week. When Mr. Rotundo took over the rink, his prices went up. Valley League, at that point, pulled out of the Ristusha Arena because, yes, they do have other rinks. They own 4 ice rinks. Valley League is the largest youth hockey league in the United States. They're by far in New England, every single town program plays for Valley League. So they have rinks. They don't own the rinks. They use town rinks all over New England. At 2004, when they pulled out of the Ristusha Arena, that was a $900,000 a year contract. So let's go to Burbank. Burbank's a private rink. The rink was donated by Mr. Burbank. It was built, all expenses paid by Mr. Burbank, offered to the town of Reading, and they run it. It is not a Valley League rink. They have no leagues that play out of Reading. So what you're seeing in the red here is because they don't have all that income coming in. During the day, the ice really doesn't get used that much, maybe for stick practice here and there. As far as the Bruins, yes, that's a big contract and that's hard to lose. But they skate during the day from 10 to 1 o'clock or 11 to 1 o'clock. Nobody else skates during that time. So if you wanted to have a junior program come in, just like Mr. Rotundo has now with his junior Shamrocks, the town of Wilmington could do that and make up that money also. But to me, bringing the Valley League back into Ristusha, letting Wilmington Youth Hockey have home games at Ristusha, and getting back what would probably be, my guess, is like $1.2 or $1.3 million coming into the Ristusha rink. I just wanted to address that, and I also wanted to say, losing St. John's would benefit Wilmington Youth Hockey because when high school hockey season starts, Wilmington Youth Hockey loses, I think it's 8 hours a week, if I'm correct. It's not lost to Wilmington High School. Wilmington High School practices right after school. They rush from school, they go over there, they get their hour-and-a-half practice. The girls practice in the morning or in Stoneham or wherever they can. I want to say, if I only have 1 minute, okay. I have in my hands the original, what do we call these? The original charter for the arena, right here, where it states what that rink was built for, how much it was built for, and who was supposed to use it. And in the last 30 years, we've been handcuffed. High school, youth hockey, figure skating, we have to play by their rules, what their contract says, and if we don't like it, yes, we're told we can go elsewhere. Thank you.
Mr. Bodnar.
Mr. Stewart and Finance Committee members, selectmen, we can pack them in, I guess, when an article's this important to the town. I'd like to cede my time to Mr. McDonald, seeing as he's a little more intelligent than I am.
Mr. Foskett? Mr. Bodnar, I've conferred with Town Council. The only time that time can be yielded is when the motion for previous question. So the maker of the motion, once the assembly has voted to move the question, the maker of the motion per the bylaws can yield his time to another voter. There is not an opportunity or anywhere in the bylaws that allows you to yield your time to another speaker, other than that. Further discussion?
Well, if that's the case, can I put my 2 cents in?
Of course you can. It's your. Yep.
As I stated earlier, we can pack them in. Sounds like a very worthy project, but what I realize, and most of you know, I'm third generation. My daughter's a fourth generation. We're here to stay. You people that are in here this evening, I won't call you Johnny-come-latelys, but you, well, all right, I will take that back. But do you propose your families will be here for the next 80, 90 years? Well, then, I'll change that venue. If that's the case, I'll keep this sweet and short. Be very careful what you vote for, because you may get it. It may come around and bite you somewhere. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Hi, Scott McGrath. I just have a couple of quick questions, Mr. Hull, about the financial projections you have. You mentioned that Stoneham got somewhere between $30 and $90 or $100,000. Is that in excess of their cost, or contributing towards their $419,000 cost in 2013?
So in Stoneham, the town operates the rink. They they actually have employees that run the rink. The amounts that came back was in excess of their expenses from one year to the next. So, in the earlier years, there was a period of time when back in the early 2000s when they were struggling, but the last several years, last 7 or 8 years, under the current management, they've been able to maintain a viable operation there. They've brought money back to the town.
Great, thank you. One other quick question. The rink now is paying real estate taxes to the town of something greater than $70,000 a year?
Yes, right now the last taxes that for fiscal 14 were about $94,000. Those taxes would continue to be paid in the 3 years that Rotundo Enterprises operates the rink, and then thereafter, of course, they would stop.
So that kind of $90,000 net loss wouldn't be reflected in the enterprise fund balance sheet or the enterprise operating expenses. So that money kind of goes away from the general account, but it doesn't, get reflected in the enterprise account, because it's magic money that went away that you as a manager is going to have to make up somehow.
That's correct. It is not reflected in the enterprise fund. That is money that comes to the town. The town's total revenue from property taxes is a little over $66 million. This reflects about 1/10 or 1%. Certainly, you don't want to lose revenue, but in the end, at the end of the day, from my perspective, given the size of the loss and the fact that the priority here is on providing another service, I think on balance, it's the right thing to do.
And last question. I'm in big favor of the use of the enterprise fund because it forces the kind of transparency that you folks were looking for when you're looking into this. It's kind of gives the taxpayers and everyone the income and expense reporting. So my question is twofold. In your report here, you don't show any of the indirect expenses that might be incurred. I'm wondering if you're suggesting here they wouldn't be incurred, things like plowing and personnel for cleaning the buildings and things. Those are typically indirect costs that are reflected in an enterprise fund report. And will we expect to see a full roll-up enterprise report as part of our annual report, so we can see what the financial performance of this enterprise, which we've kind of, you're asking us to guarantee the performance of that enterprise, and I think a lot of business people would like that, to be able to have someone guaranteeing the financial performance. So that's why I think the enterprise fund is right, because it requires a level of reporting. I'm just wondering, is that reporting going to appear in the town report, in the annual report?
Well, I guess it sounds like there were a series of questions there. One is in terms of indirect costs. Reflected in here is the cost of personnel. We're projecting that a vendor or a company would be hired to run the rink, and that is reflected in here. So they would assume the costs of their personnel to run the rink, scheduling, maintenance would be part of that. We would also, as part of the estimate that we've done, we're looking to set aside $25,000 a year for capital costs. There may be instances going forward where capital, replacing some large component of the rink that would be required would require a borrowing, and that would be, again, charged back to the enterprise fund. But to answer your other question in terms of reporting, my expectation would be that the enterprise balances would be reflected in the town report.
Thank you.
Further discussion, Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Moderator, good evening, everybody. First of all, I do support this article, and I really believe this is something that we really need to do. The town manager was instructed by the Board of Selectmen to go see Mr. Astuccia and to show him that the town was very interested in purchasing the rink. And it was a true buyer. The town of Wilmington's a corporation. We have over $10 million in free cash, and we could literally afford to pay for this, subject to town meeting vote. And I understand that's why we're here tonight, because the manager has to plan for his budget. But the one thing that does bother me is the fact that Mr. Astuccia, when he was contacted by the town manager, he knew that we were very supportive of this. And what bothers me, and it should bother you, and I still support the hockey rink, because not only does the residents deserve it, our children deserve a rink to call their own, and I fully support it. What bothers me is Mr. Astuccia, after talking to the town manager, signed a 3-year extension lease agreement with Mr. Rotunda. Well, that does bother me. And what it is what it is. But I still support us going forward with the rink. And that should bother you too. And you have to think about that. And I think Mr. Newhouse did a great job talking about the past. And I'll talk about the past. I served on the Wilmington Planning Board in 1984 through 1987, before elected to the Board of Selectmen in 1987. And we moved heaven and earth to accommodate the Mr. Astuccia, Benny Astuccia, that owned Wilmington Ford. And we did that. And I remember back in 1985, where the Sonic hamburger place is, there was a car dealership there. Mr. Astuccia pulled out in his convertible his green Shelby, and that was his pride and joy. And not only was Mr. Astuccia there, Benny Astuccia, the original Mr. Astuccia, we had Mr. Baseball broadcaster himself, Kurt Gowdy, was here in the town of Wilmington to state how great this was going to be, and it was a wonderful thing. And at the end of the day, the best thing was going to be for our kids. Well, obviously, 30 years later, we're trying to make a wrong and make it all right. And I was there in person. I thought it was a great thing, even though I could barely fit into Bobby O'Reilly skates at the time. I had no children at the time, not married, but I was for this. And I think it's a great thing. I still think it's a great thing. But we just got to think of that. And I think at the end of the day, that we need to make a wrong as a right, as Mr. Newhouse stated, and it's not what we were promised. And we weren't promised that in 1985, but you have to think about that. What it is what it is. We're married to this guy for 3 years. If we do buy it, I'm all in favor of it, and I just hope at the end of the day that we do what we were intended to do, unfortunately, 30 years later. And I'm with you folks, and we need to support it. Thank you.
Mr. Hayden?
My name is Dick Hayden. I've got 6 kids and 18 grandchildren, 15 of them in Wilmington, 3 just over the line in Tewksbury. This is deja vu all over again for me, because 30 years ago, as Mike said, we all sat in the high school gym and we went through this whole deal about building the rink. Frank Kelly, the track coach, spoke for it. I spoke for it. We thought we were going to get the rink for Wilmington, and it turned out that it wasn't a rink for Wilmington. It was a rink for everybody else to skate in, but Wilmington kids. And so having watched hockey for those 30 years, and all the kids and everything, and then the kind of distances they have to travel to get to games, and the kind of times they have to do practices at. You see a kid in the 6th grade, he comes home at 9 o'clock at night from a practice. That's ridiculous, you know? So we need to have resources in this town that will allow us to run our programs appropriately. And it isn't like a lack of demand. You know, we have all the boys teams, but we also have girls hockey, girls figure skating. We got adults doing figure skating. You know, it's not a resource that's not going to be underutilized. It's going to be very utilized. If you take a look at the numbers, I don't even know why we're in the room here talking. We're not talking about any significant numbers. You know, these are immaterial numbers compared to how we spend money many other places. So, all I want... there'll be a few people that get up and poo-poo it, you know? But let them come to the rinks with their kids and their grandkids, and let them see the rinks full of people and so forth, and find out that this is a good activity for kids, keeps them out of trouble, makes them work hard. They can take it on to the next level, whether it be a college or somewhere else. So I would urge everybody to vote for this. Thank you.
My name is Matt Savage. I live at 55 Garden Ave. I really want to address this out to a lot of the people who might be against this or might be on the fence. And just to address you, I guess I'm one of those Johnny-come-latelys. I've only been here for 13 years. But I chose to come here. It was my choice to come here and raise my family, which I've done. I have 3 kids now, 2 of them in youth hockey. And just my oldest son is 11 years old. He's in 6th grade. He had a practice on Wednesday that was in Billerica, the Chelmsford Forum at 8:20. So when you get back from that, you get undressed, you drive back, you take a shower. He's not getting to bed till close to 11 o'clock. And it's not like he's got a lot of hair like his dad, so he's not spending too much time shampooing. But 11 o'clock, and then he's got to get up and get on a bus at 6:15. So that's just something to consider about that. 1 practice a week if we're lucky. My son, again, has never played a home game in the rink in the town that he's grown up. Just picture if you have a son or a daughter or a granddaughter or grandson who couldn't play soccer at Shawsheen or football down at the town hall or baseball at Rotary. So just consider this. I know people are worried about money. But one reason why I and my wife chose this town was because of the fiscally responsible nature of how they run this town. Better than a lot of the places around here, all right? And the final part is, if you take a look across here, you have a lot of people who grew up in Wilmington, who grew up through the hockey system, who grew up through basketball and baseball and football. But you also have a lot of people who came to this town from far-off lands like Malden and Somerville and Medford. But in all seriousness, and nothing brings community together more than sports. Look how this town rallied when the high school went to the championship. Everyone comes together. Last year, the mothers of Wilmington Youth Hockey raised thousands of dollars for breast cancer research through Chicks with Sticks. So just keep that in mind. This is more than just money. This is about a community. I believe the motto of this town is small town, big family. Nothing says big family more than youth hockey and skating and ice skating and public skates. So just consider that. Consider your children, your grandchildren. Consider when you were a kid and the opportunities laid to you. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mike Shea, I live at 31 Park Street. I'm all for hockey, love hockey, saw Bobby Orr score that goal many years ago. Hockey's great, but I'd just like to remind the board that we're a nation that's $20 trillion in debt right now. Lou, I saw you at the last meeting acknowledge how it's tough. We're in tough economic times, and people are struggling to make it. I know this is a moot issue because you're going to pass it. God bless the hockey team. They've been a wonderful attribute to the town. They've done great, and I'm very happy for them. But it's getting harder and harder to live in this town. It's through the roof. This year alone, we're talking about $350. I remember Mike Kyra saying it's only a cup of coffee. That's what it equates to. Well, it's a lot more than that. And I saw you personally acknowledge the tough economic times at the last meeting, you know? And my question for you, I guess, is this. What are you going to tell the older folks that live here, that are living on Social Security, that are having a tough time making it now, that are being pushed out of this town, that have a vested interest in this town, that have paid taxes since the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and they've lived here all this time. They've already purchased 2 high schools.
They've purchased, now they're purchasing a rink. They purchased new bleachers for the football field that are being scrapped. And, you know, it's just, the numbers are mind-boggling. $100 million for a high school. And now I don't know what you're paying for the rink, and I really don't care. I just know that it's going to raise my taxes. And it's going to hurt. Yeah, well, you can boo me if you want, but it's tough, you know? And the worst part is in a town of 20,000 people, we just have enough people here that couldn't even fill this rink that you're talking about. And they're going to decide this, and it's basically the hockey team, you know, and the hockey supporters, and nobody else comes out in 20,000 people. But I just want you to know that it's making a lot of people suffer, you know, and that's all I got to say, that we're a nation that's $20 trillion in debt, and it's buy, tax, and gets tougher every day. And I don't mean to be the bad guy, but I just want to know, what are you going to tell the people that can't afford to make the tax rate this time around? What do you have to say to them? Get out? I don't know. I'm waiting to hear an answer.
Mr. Smaglia?
Sure. I'm not sure what meeting you're talking about, that I said it's tough economic times, but it is. I absolutely believe it is. And let me address a couple things here. First of all, you said it's about the hockey team. Well, yeah, there is a hockey family here. And everybody can come out and vote at town meeting and speak at town meeting like you did. In my office in Veteran Services, I deal with a lot of seniors, a lot of widows of veterans, and it is a hard time. It's an amazing time, but this town, fiscally responsibility has been number one for years. I'm a blow-in. I've only been here since 1986. I'm from Rosendale, but I do understand it's tough. But when you look at the big picture, this town is an amazing town. If somebody gets sick, they rally around them. If somebody needs something, they rally. If the Chicks for Sticks raise money for cancer just because. Wilmington Pop Warner has been a thriving, unbelievable organization for years, Little League. So I understand it's tough, and I would never tell anybody to leave. But there's also ways to work with people with tax abatements, exemptions, and things like that for your taxes. But one more point with seniors. The seniors that I talk to are for this, and they say and you mentioned the new high school, when they were growing up and their kids were growing up here, they had a new high school in the 50s. Somebody paid for that. The seniors the seniors then helped pay for that new high school. So it's just a thing in town that we have to do. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. The new high school, the people that went to the high school then, somebody paid for it. The seniors, the people that were seniors then helped pay for the high school. It is what it is. And if this body votes in favor of this, so be it. And I understand you're against it, and I feel your pain. I feel my pain too. But I'm standing in favor of this article. And I think that we as a town and our management will be able to handle and absolutely get the best bang for their buck in this town, and on all the things, the school, the rink, and everything else. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Nicole Crowley. I live at 5 Draper Drive in Wilmington. I just have a quick question. So, and this is thinking ahead. If this should pass, Bob Rotundo has 3 years left on his lease. Are there ways to be able to keep it so that Wilmington Youth Hockey, the figure skating club, will be able to maintain at least their ice time that they currently have? Or could there be repercussions where there's 3 hours with no ice? Or 3 years with no ice, I meant to say. Is that a possibility?
Mr. Hull.
The lease that is currently in existence between Mr. Restucia and Rotundo Enterprises will be the lease that remains in place going forward. So essentially, Rotundo Enterprises is able to operate the rink as they deem appropriate for the term of that lease through 2018. So I guess to answer the question, if they, for whatever reason, decide that they're no longer interested in providing ice time to a certain group, they're within their rights to do that.
Mr. Newhouse?
If I may add to that response, I don't think that, certainly I speak for myself, and I suspect for my colleagues up here, we can't for a minute presume to speak for what a private entrepreneur decides to do with his contracts. But it is my understanding that there is a contract in place. So, you know, from my standpoint, if an owner of a facility like that, based on a town meeting vote, when there is no relationship between Wilmington Youth Hockey and the town, other than the fact that we're all a community, obviously, but there is no financial relationship whatsoever. I have a hard time believing that anybody, including Mr. Rotundo, would see fit to break a contract that's worth $130,000 a year because the town takes a certain step. Can I speak for him? Obviously not, but I can speak as a parent, and I can speak as a participant in the youth hockey process. Somebody tries to break a deal with me, I'm going to hold them to it.
I just want to finish with, I'm a former treasurer for Wilmington Youth Hockey, and Janice Giannetti and myself and the former president, we all met with Bob Rotundo, was it 2 years ago, and discussed the upcoming season's contract, trying to get ahead of it. He said he was very willing to work with us with ice time, and then it came that we lost prime time for the younger folks, which is our thriving part of the organization. So I just want you to keep that in mind if there's anything that can be done to protect the youth hockey kids if this should pass, because it's very important that they keep this ice. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, sir. Everyone gets to speak once before you get to speak twice, Mr. McDonald.
Even if Ms. Newhouse spoke twice?
Mr. Newhouse answered a question, Mr. McDonald.
My name's Garrett Palmer. I'm 46 Swain Road. I got two things going against me. One, I'm a senior citizen, and I've only been in Wilmington for 25 years. One, senior citizens or older people, I'm 64 years old, want to see youth hockey, want to see all sports for kids. It's not just an age issue. I live on a fixed income, being retired, but still, I'm willing to support anything that can help these children. Keep these children in Wilmington, let them play in Wilmington, let them have fun in Wilmington. We always talk money, but we never really get down to the brass, the root of it. It's kids. We don't do enough for our kids. We all work. Support our children. Let the kids see. Let them see that we support them. Let them know that your neighbor is supporting you by supporting the hockey rink. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mark Galucci, I live at 60 Agostino. I'm on the board of directors for Wilmington Youth Hockey, and I can just answer the question that Nicole asked earlier about the ice time. We have a 4-year agreement with Mr. Rotundo for ice time, so it's already locked in. He can't take that away from us. So beyond that, talking about senior citizens, I know, and again, I do feel for people that are having a tough time out there financially. My parents are 80 years old. My father was a former hairdresser. My mother's in insurance. They're both retired. They're sitting right over here. They're making it work. They put their pennies together. They've raised 2 kids, sent us to school, helped us buy cars or what have you with the little money they had. So there's a way to make it work. So just want to think about that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Lynn Broderick, 3 Wakefield Avenue. I'd like to move the question, please.
Motion is made to move the question, which is to end debate and give the maker of the motion up to 10 minutes if they should so choose to address the body. So there is no debate on this motion. Okay, so I will try a voice vote. If you want to end debate and give Mr. Newhouse up to 10 minutes to address the body, you should vote aye. If you want to continue the debate, you should vote no. Everybody clear on what we're voting on? Anybody not clear? All those in favor of the previous question signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. Mr. Newhouse.
Notice that the moderator said I have up to 10 minutes. He didn't say I had to use 10 minutes.
It was a stressed point as well, Mr. Newhouse.
Thanks for the cue. First of all, one quick point. Appreciate everybody taking the time to be here this evening. Know it's hard. Everybody has demanding schedules. Appreciate your support. And I know that particularly time is valuable because we have other business to take care of. And we do, in fact, need to make sure we get to the end of this meeting to lock in any vote that we take. So with that reminder, I'd just say, again, please vote yes. I think it's time to take down the home of the Shamrock sign and make it home of the Wildcats.
I'd ask everyone who would like to vote to be in the seated area, please. This is going to be a standing vote, including the folks up top. And I would like to have one of the tellers please take a walk to the cafeteria just to make sure nobody's in that room. Or Mr. Burke or Mr. Carroll, if you could take a walk to the cafeteria and just make sure nobody is in there. Don't want anybody questioning the vote afterwards. And I'd ask the tellers to take their places. We're voting on Article 1 for the amount of $2,250,000 to be borrowed. Those in favor of Article 1 as presented signify by rising at your place. You got the top? Okay. This is going to take a minute, so bear with us. Remain standing. Please remain standing. They're still counting. Nice job. Got them all? John? John still coming? How many do you have? We're good? We're good. Thank you. All those opposed to Article 1 as presented signify by rising at your place. Please remain standing. Thank you. She's on her way down. Yeah. You can skip your time. Ladies and gentlemen, the vote is as follows. 391 in the affirmative, 7 in the negative. Motion passes with the required 2/3. We're on Article number 2.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. McDonald, for what purpose do you rise?
I'd like to bring up the past article for reconsideration.
And Mr. McDonald, how did you vote?
Vote for it.
You voted in favor of it and you spoke against it.
Is that illegal?
I'm going to check. Mr. McDonald, the substance of the reconsideration provision is to give someone who voted and was truly on the prevailing side of that argument to change their mind and argue the case again. You clearly were not on the side in favor of that motion. You spoke against it. You handed out a petition against it, so I'm ruling your motion out of order.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Could you recite the Mass General Law that entitles you to be able to do that, Mr. Stewart?
No, I cannot. That's my ruling, Mr. McDonald. If you'd like to challenge it, there are provisions to do so. You're now out of order. Thank you. We're on Article number 2. Mrs. Shukas?
Yes, point of information.
Yes.
If I ask for a vote again, reconsidering, this will lock in, and you can never, ever change the vote. But if you don't reconsider, somebody could come along later on, and everybody's gone home, and you lose. So I would like to.
You want to reconsider?
I would like to reconsider the vote.
So just to clarify Mrs. Shukas's point, so an article can only be reconsidered one time during this meeting. Once this meeting is adjourned, an article from this meeting cannot be reconsidered after the adjournment. So Mrs. Shukas is correct that someone could, during this meeting tonight, get up and reconsider this motion. And I believe you are doing that now. How did you vote on the article, Mrs. Shukas? You voted in favor of it, okay? I will accept that as a main motion. Is there a second? Okay, motion's made and seconded. Discussion. I tried to guide, ladies and gentlemen. I really do. I'm doing my best here. Mr. McDonald.
How much time do I have, Mr. Stewart?
You have 5 minutes.
Yes, a few things that I'd like to point out to you folks that Mr. Rotondo shared with me today. In one day, he had 3 compressors go down. It was $95,000.
Mr. McDonald, discussion is limited to why we should reconsider.
These are the reasons, Mr. Stewart, because the people were not given proper information. So I'm going to give them as much information as my time would allow. When the 3 compressors went down and it cost Mr. Rotondo $95,000, he had that rink up and running in 13 hours. Folks, do you think that the town of Wilmington knows how to run a rink? They don't. Okay? They've never run a rink. The private sector was never meant to be overtaken by government. There's a reason why we have trained professionals. There's a reason why the Bruins are at that rink. Mr. Rotundo is a professional, all right? He takes care of that rink. It's not a disaster like other rinks out there. Now, folks, one thing you need
Folks,
to...
if I could have order, please. One person speaking, thank you.
One thing you folks need to understand is that there is a contract here for 3 or 4 years. It seems to me it's 4 years, but some people think it's 3, all right? You're not going to get control of that rink for that amount of time. I'm telling you, folks, I'm not against hockey, but there is a better way to do this. There is a better way to do this that would be revenue generating. The Wilmington rink only holds 1,300 spectators, okay? The Stoneham Arena holds 1,800. Folks, we have the Yentile Farm, okay? We got about $12 or $13 million in the bank in free cash. You got to ask yourself one question. If we have all that money and the town is a nonprofit entity and they've gained that money by overtaxing you, why are we going to borrow money? Why is this a bond offering? Why isn't the money being taken out of free cash? Why aren't we voting on that tonight? Why aren't we voting to get 2 rinks instead of 1 rink that's, 30 years old, that is going to need a new roof, is going to need $650,000 in chillers, okay? And then on top of that, when the town owns the rink, okay, you have to ask this one question. Is the FBI going to be involved? The FBI, friends, brothers, and in-laws. You're going to get their buddy getting to run the rink, and then we got to pay pension funds? Folks, you got to think about this a little bit harder. Do you want something? You want to commit yourself to excellence, or do you want to commit yourself to an old rink that needs repairs, that the town is probably going to take over, put their friends in there, give them a pension, hammer you even more in taxes, okay? And still, the Valley League will be playing at other rinks and not being played in Wilmington.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
The other thing I'd like to use my whole time, Mr. Stewart, I'd like a clarification on something from the planning board. Can you tell us, planning officials, if the new development that was built on the right side of the rink has had a road go through the parking lot of the Wilmington Ice Arena? I'd like to reserve the balance of my time after I hear that answer to that.
Your time's about up, Mr. McDonald. I'm not sure if you repeat the question, I'm not following the pertinence of your question.
This is for the planning board. There was a development built to the right of the rink. Access is through the parking lot. I'm concerned that that was not done properly and that this really isn't about the kids. It's about the developers. It's about a partnership that wants to get another property beside the rink developed. And this whole thing is, you people are being played for fools that it's about your kids when it's really about the developers.
I got your question. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. And your time.
Did I have the answer to the question, sir, from the planning board?
Mr. McDonald, I heard the question. You don't need to raise your voice to me. I take exception to it. Mr. Sorrentino.
There is a development next door, and they do have access to the rink, and it was done according to planning board rules and regulations.
Thank you. Further discussion. Your time's
Point
up,
of order.
Mr.
Point of
What's
order.
your point of order?
How is it in accordance to planning board rules and regulations?
That's not a
to build
point of
road
order,
through a
Mr.
parking
McDonald.
lot?
Mr. McDonald, you're out of order. Thank you. Let me try to guide the rest of the speakers here, if I can. We are on a motion to reconsider. If this body chooses to reconsider and votes yes, we will bring the whole main motion up again to speak. If you vote no, we will end this discussion for good. So I will leave this up to the speakers at the microphones. If you would choose to speak, it's obviously your right, or we can take a vote right now. I thought you would see it my way. Okay, we'll try a voice vote, okay? We're voting to reconsider. So if you want to bring Article 1 up again, rediscuss the whole thing all over again, and then revote it, you should vote yes. If you want to just end it and have the vote you took 5 minutes ago stand now and forever, you should vote no. Everybody clear on what we're voting on? Anybody not clear? Those in favor of reconsidering signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. No. Motion is defeated. Article number 2. To see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53F1 half of the Massachusetts General Laws to establish, beginning July 1st, 2015, and continuing thereafter, the Restucia Arena Enterprise Fund for the recreational facility known as the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena and its operation, into which fund shall be deposited all receipts, revenues, and funds from any source derived from all activities of the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena, which fund shall be applied pursuant to the processes described in said General Laws, Chapter 44S, 53F1 half, to pay for some or all of the expenses of operating, maintaining, and improving the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena and property, all under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager, or to take any other action related thereto. Is there a motion, Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and by the way, you're doing a great job. I move that the provisions of General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half. Oh, I'm glad I said that one right. Hi, kids. Of the Massachusetts General Laws be accepted to establish, beginning July 1st, 2015, and continuing thereafter, the Restucia Arena Enterprise Fund for the recreational facility known as the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena.
And Mr. McCoy, does your motion read as is in the booklet?
Yes, it does, sir.
Great, I'll accept that as the main motion. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Finance Committee recommendation, approval, discussion. Mr. Hull.
As previously mentioned, the Enterprise Fund is a mechanism that we use in some types of operations to fund the programs. Some cases, the water or sewer is operated through an enterprise fund. Some communities have golf courses. They run them through an enterprise fund. Essentially, the point is that the enterprise fund allows the revenue that is generated from that activity to go back into this account and then be used to pay for the services for that program. So that would be the intent here with this article.
Further discussion? We're ready for the vote. We're on Article number 2. This requires a majority. We'll try a voice vote. All those in favor of Article 2 as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. We're on Article number 3. To see if the town will authorize the town manager to acquire, sell, lease, exchange, transfer, or otherwise dispose of any personal property related to the operation of the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena for ice skating and other recreational and general municipal purposes. To authorize the town manager to execute and deliver such contracts, operation agreements, and instruments, and to enter into such undertakings in furtherance of the foregoing and the operation of the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena for such consideration and on such terms as the town manager deems advisable. To authorize the Board of Selectmen to lease, license, rent, or otherwise dispose of the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena and any portions of the property numbered 190 and 190R Main Street in Wilmington for ice skating and other recreational and general municipal purposes for terms of up to 30 years, and to execute and deliver such leases, easements, licenses, and instruments, and to enter into such undertakings in furtherance of the foregoing for such consideration and on such terms as the Board of Selectmen deems advisable, or take any other action related thereto. Is there a motion? Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town manager be authorized to acquire, sell, lease, exchange, transfer, or otherwise dispose of any personal property related to the operation of the Eleanor M. Restucia Memorial Arena for ice skating and other recreational and general municipal purposes.
And Ms. O'Connell, does your motion read as in the booklet?
Yes, sir.
I'll accept that as the main motion. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Finance Committee recommendation, approval, discussion. Mr. Hull.
This article provides us with some opportunities in terms of how the rink is operated. As I mentioned earlier, communities that we've talked to have done this in a number of ways. Some communities, such as Stoneham, for example, they actually hire individuals who are employees of the town of Stoneham. In the case of Burlington and Chelmsford, they hire a vendor, a contractor who is, their profession is running rinks. The article, if passed, would give us the opportunity to go through a process of procuring those rink management services.
For a discussion, Mr. McDonald.
Yes, I heard earlier that a company named, I believe it was FMC, was under consideration to possibly run the rink. It's my understanding that they run 23 other rinks in the state, and those are basically like MDC rinks. And it's my understanding that they're getting subsidized from the state. We heard different rental rates tonight on ice time, but I haven't heard Mr. Newhouse mention about the state subsidies going to FMC to run those rinks. So I'm just wondering if the cost comparisons are being skewed a little bit because this information isn't being shared with the people. So Mr. Hull, can you enlighten
Point
us?
of personal privilege before he proceeds.
Certainly, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Newhouse. Actually, I'll give you the point of personal privilege when he's done. Is that fair?
Fair.
Fair.
Yes, I guess Mr. Hull, who's leading the charge here, maybe he could share a couple things with us. Can you tell us, Mr. Hull, how much investigation and analysis that you've performed to see where FMC is getting their money, and share with us any other type of analysis that you've done on this?
First of all, I did not indicate that we were going to use FMC. I simply referenced them as an example of an outfit that runs rinks in Burlington and Chelmsford. If we were to go the route of having an enterprise like FMC, which is an enterprise that runs ice rinks, we would go through a procurement process as we do with all of these types of services. So we'd put together a request for proposal, establish a bid specification or a proposal specification, issue it, and then whoever is the most favorable bidder would receive the job. So to answer the question, because I am not necessarily endorsing FMC, I haven't done any specific investigation of their particulars.
Well, I mean, it would be logical to assume that when a large expenditure like this is being proposed to the people tonight, that there would have been an analysis done. There would have been an investigation done, to give us a list of companies out there that run rinks, so that these folks could go to other rinks and see the quality of operation that they're performing. I mean, in all honesty, folks, in all honesty, do you really want somebody coming in here who's not going to give you a quality product? I mean, let's face it. I mean, I haven't met this guy Rotundo until today. The guy could not have been nicer. I've heard nothing but good things about this guy. And personally, if I'm going to pay money in taxes,
Mr. McDonald, I've given you a lot of latitude on this one. We're on an article to dispose of personal property.
Well, I guess the other question was, what personal property would have to be disposed of?
Mr. Hull?
We're certainly not looking to purchase the rink and then dispose of it. So the intent is clearly to provide a mechanism for operating the rink. I would just point out one thing. It seems curious to me. On the one hand, we had Mr. McDonald berating the town for not being able to run the rink, now being critical of the fact that we might be looking for a rink professional to run the rink.
Further discussion, Mr. Malarkey. Mr. Malarkey, get your types.
Thank you. Peter Malarkey, 43 Oakdale Road. Fourth, fifth generation, I don't even remember anymore. What was your name again? What are you, third generation? Yeah, what was your name? No, the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, never heard of you. Anyway. There were days, if I know some people here are old enough to remember, going down to Chestnut Street, going to the town, the tennis courts at the high school, grab your friends, go down, skate, pick up hockey. Those kind of opportunities do not exist as we currently have our situation. My hope is that we get to change that. So we have those opportunities for our children, Kevin. This is for our children. I hope you understand that. I don't think he does either. But that being said, I want to thank the board and the town for what they're doing. And when we're done here, I hope we all give Jim Stewart a big round of applause because this is his last moderation. Thank you. So, thank you, Jim. Appreciate your work.
In my last meeting, I messed up because I was supposed to go to Mr. Newhouse last, so I apologize. Point of personal privilege. Ms. Shukas.
Okay. I've been here 58 years, never missed a town meeting, and I've never seen us do anything dumb. And we're not dumb. We don't put out things that we can't afford. They said we can't afford $82 million high school. When we built the high school, when I first came into town, they said they couldn't afford that either. There are a lot of things that you cannot afford. Fine, don't vote them in. But hockey? I mean, hockey is a way of life. It really is. My kids all grew up in Wilmington. My grandchildren, none of them played hockey. My son-in-law, who married my granddaughter, played hockey. But I wouldn't miss a hockey game. The Bruins, I mean, don't call me when they're on. I don't answer the phone. So when you're voting, don't think about just the dollar bill. If they're claiming there will be no new taxes, there won't be. They've done this before. They're up here. They're professionals. We're voting from our heart. They're voting from our pocketbook, so keep it in mind.
Further discussion? Yes, sir.
How you doing? Tommy Joyce, King Street. I love that lady. All right? Hey, you're absolutely right. Everything. I moved up here in '04 from Charlestown, Mass. All right? Hockey's in my blood. My kid lives here now. All the people with the blue jackets, Wilmington jackets on, I met them playing hockey. Unbelievable family I got up here in Wilmington. This is my new home, and I'm proud of it, and I hope we go forth for the rink. Thank you. You guys have been all great.
Further discussion? Anyone who hasn't spoken? Mr. Doherty. I'm sorry? Mr. Doherty has moved the question. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. It's not debatable. If you want to end debate and give the maker of the motion, Ms. O'Connell, up to 10 minutes, you should vote yes. If you want to continue debate, you should vote no. Everybody clear? Yes. Anybody not clear? All those in favor of the previous question signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. Ms. O'Connell waives her right. We're on Article number 3.
Point of order.
What's your point of order,
Actually,
Mr.
I'd like to bring it up for reconsideration, that article.
We haven't even voted yet.
Just voted. Okay.
Okay. Okay, we're on Article number 3, ladies and gentlemen. I'll try a voice vote. I would ask, I know many of you are here for these first 3 articles. We have a 4th article on the planning board is sponsoring. I would plead with you, please remain for the 4th article so we don't have a disruption when everyone leaves. Probably 15 minutes. That's my guess, just a guess, okay? If I could get your help on that, I would greatly appreciate it. We're on Article number 3. We'll try a voice vote even though it requires a 2/3. All those in favor of Article 3 as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted and done so unanimously.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. McDonald?
I'd like to bring that up for reconsideration.
Is there he did vote in favor. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Mr. McDonald.
Yes, I have some questions for the town manager. Actually, this would be a question for the town council. Mr. Town Council, after reading the language in this article.
Moderator, point of order.
What's the point of order, Mr. Newhouse?
Isn't a motion to consideration supposed to speak to some reason why he's changed his mind? It's not another opportunity to ask a bunch of questions.
It is his opportunity to ask questions that are pertinent to Article 3 and why he would have a question to change his vote. So I'm going to be very careful with the questions that you're asking here, Mr. McDonald. We are
Yes.
on Article number 3. We are not going back into Article 1 and 2.
With regard to Article 3, Mr. Town Council, where it has to do with contracts, leases, disposal of the property, anything like that, if the town in the future should so discover that this rink is losing massive amounts of money, does this article cover the town to be able to sell the rink to maybe an abutting developer when the town finds out that it's bleeding money and it's not profitable? Does this article cover the town to be able to sell this rink?
Mr. Foskett, if you could take the microphone, yeah.
The answer is that this vote would authorize the Board of Selectmen to dispose of the arena if it was determined to be in the best interest of the town.
Thank you.
Okay?
So basically, what I see here, folks, I've passed out a sheet that shows you the Burbank Arena losing money for a number of years. A couple things I want to point out. You're losing the Bruins, you're losing the Shamrocks, you're losing St. John's Prep, okay? Depending on how the Wilmington Youth Hockey is set up with any contracts with the Valley League or any other leagues, okay, you might not get that revenue. So what happens when Mr. Hull is wrong and all of a sudden this rink is bleeding money big time? And then a vote comes up that it's not profitable, it's not in our best interest to run it, and then all of a sudden, okay, if you haven't thought about this,
Okay,
if you
Mr.
look in the
McDonald,
part of the
Mr.
article...
McDonald, Mr. McDonald, you made your point, you got your question answered. That's the point of discussion on reconsideration. Thank you. Further discussion?
Can we move the question?
I would advise against that.
Okay.
No one else here to speak? We're going to take the vote right now. Okay, thank you. Because the maker of that motion gets 10 minutes. Aha, yes. Yeah. Hey, thank you. Okay, we're voting on whether we should reconsider this article. If you want to reconsider Article 3, bring it up again, rediscuss it, revote it, you should vote yes. If you want to keep the vote you just took, you should vote no. Okay, we all clear? Yes. Okay. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 3 signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. No. Voted. We're on Article number 4. This is a lengthy article, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I am assuming that Mr. Sorrentino is going to explain this article in detail to you, so I'm not going to bore you with 3 pages of reading. To see, Article 4, to see if the town will vote to amend the following sections of Section 6.4 of the zoning bylaws of the town of Wilmington as follows. And is there a motion? Mr. Sorrentino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town will vote to amend the following sections of Section 6.4 of the zoning bylaws of the town of Wilmington as follows.
And does your motion read as is in the booklet?
Yes, it does, Mr.
It
Moderator.
does. I'll accept that as a main motion. Is there any objection from anyone to me accepting that without reading it to you? Great. I'll accept that. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Finance Committee recommendation is approval. Planning Board recommendation is obviously approval. Discussion, Mr. Sorrentino.
This is just a house cleaning article. It will allow in the commercial areas to share parking. It's kind of something that came up with the Target, if you're familiar with the new Target up on Ballardville Street. So there could be two entities that could use similar parking, that's all. So it's kind of the way development, office buildings are kind of going, and all the adjoining towns do the same.
Questions? Comments? Yeah.
I got a question.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes. The question, I have a few questions. The first question is, was this article developed to actually help this rink go forward? And is it setting a precedent for other zoning districts in town to use this same article, for example, on
Hold up. What's the answer, Mr. Sorensen?
This article has absolutely nothing to do with the rink.
With the rink. Thank you.
This has nothing to do with parking for the rink, because we were told that there was going to be a rezoning for parking for the rink. The other question I had is,
I am unaware
what's
of any
the
such thing.
adequate amount of parking places needed at that rink, mister?
This has nothing to do with the rink, Mr. McDonald.
I think it does, but
It does
you know,
not.
well, it has to do with parking. It has to do with commercial space. So I think he's wrong in his answer. That's all I want to point out.
Thank you very
Okay?
much. Further discussion? Mr. Sorrentino, anything? No? We're good? We're ready for the vote? Okay, we're on Article number 4. And I didn't even get to tell anybody tonight that they were on thin ice. I was ready to use that. I waited all night. So on Article number 4, this requires a 2/3 vote. We'll try a voice vote. All those in favor of Article 4 as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. Those opposed say no. Voted and done so unanimously. Okay. And before I take a motion to adjourn, Mr. Bodnar, just a comment. I, too, am a lifelong resident of Wilmington for 55 years, and all I have to say is, go Wildcats. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Voted. Happy holidays, everyone.